Hey guys, so I'm back and this is part 2 of my video, which is my narrated process of how I draw a male fashion illustration. And yeah, so let's get started.
I don't really have a lot to say about the inking of this particular illustration. I mean, I touched on it in my previous video, which was the complete narrated process of how I draw a female fashion illustration. And it's basically the same technique. I use the same fineliner, so that's the same material. I don't really know what else to say, but I guess I could kind of emphasize that how I ink is I usually do the outlines first, and then the details kind of last. It's just the same concept as sketching. I mean, you block in the shapes first, and then you kind of just fix it up a little bit, make it neat, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the same as inking. I mean, my inking process, I usually start with the outline, and then I do the face, which requires a lot of details as well as the hair. So those kind of become last, and also the last few things that I do when I'm inking usually is because I tend to make mistakes. I try to make my lines as neat as possible, the edges as sharp or, as precise, but that doesn't always happen, so I end up going back into them at the final stage of inking and just kind of adjusting them, making them look as if they were not an accident at all. So, yeah. So we've reached the coloring stage of this illustration, and it's quite different from how I did it with my previous videos, where I've either used Copic markers and kind of just touched up a little bit with the color pencils, or if I've only used color pencils. With this one, I actually combined the two, and they're both equally used throughout the entire illustration. And what I did is I usually start off with a base layer or a first layer, and that's using the Copic markers. Most of the time, I'd usually not care if the layer was really streaky, because Copic markers are really expensive, and I want to not waste a whole lot of ink as much as possible, so I kind of just make it streaky, because if I want to achieve a smooth, flat surface, that kind of wastes a lot of ink, and in the end, I'm going to be covering that layer with a whole lot of color pencils anyway, so yeah, I'm just doing that for the entire clothing and the skin of this figure. Also, I'm just kind of adding in some shades just to kind of indicate where I'm going to be placing the darker areas later with my color pencils, and yeah. So now I'm coloring in using the color pencils, and I'm coloring in the skin, and as you can see, the first layer actually has a lot of white, and it just has like this little bit of flesh tint to it, which is different from the shirt, because how I colored in the shirt and the shorts and the shoes, they're all flat, but with this one, the reason is I am running out, or slowly running out, of skin colors, so my favorite ones are actually dead. Like, I try to use them because sometimes I hope that there's still a little bit of ink left in them, but it's really squeaky and I get scared, so I don't use it anymore because I don't want to ruin the nib. That just means having to replace the nib, and that means having to buy a nib, and that means having to spend money, and I don't really want to do that. So I'm kind of just using the other skin colors that I have, and they're also almost dying. So to minimize the usage of ink as much as possible, I just kind of indicate where the shadows and where the dark areas are going to be. Because in the end, as I said, they're going to be covered with a whole lot of layer of color pencils anyway. So right now I am coloring in the top of this fashion illustration, and I kind of touched on the technique that I used to color in with the medium in my previous video, which was a narrated video, I think, of how I draw a fashion illustration using only color pencils as the medium, and the brand is Faber-Castell. I'll put all the names or brands of things that I use for this particular illustration in my description box in case any of you guys are wondering. Yeah, so the proper names are going to be in the down bar. How I usually color in with the medium is, as what I said in my previous video, through layers. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much I love playing with layers. I love creating different shades of colors through layers. It's just awesome, and it's like therapeutic in a way, because you start off really soft, and then you kind of just build it up gradually, getting darker in the shades, and once you're in the kind of final layers with the color pencils, then you start to press hard, and it's just kind of like a release. It's pretty cool. I have no idea how to explain it, but I like using coloring pencils, so yeah. I guess that's about it. I don't really know what else to say because I'm going to be expanding this anyway in an actual tutorial video, which is actually coming up next. So that's not next Friday, but the Friday after next Friday. Yeah, so it's going to be a tutorial on Copic markers, but don't expect it to be too advanced or anything because I haven't really experimented with Copic markers, so it's going to be like for beginners, which is what a lot of my tutorials are actually. And yeah, so that's about it.